this thematic track on climate finance, accelerating India's decarbonization journey. I'm Palak Khanna, Research Associate and Area Convener at TERI, and it's my absolute honor to be your MC for this important session. I would request all the panelists to be on the dais. Mr. Pankaj Sindwani, Chief Business Officer, Cleantech Finance, Tata Capital, and Managing Partner of the Tata Capital Decarbonization Fund. He'll be the absolute chair for this session. And we have him joining on the panel, Mr. Sanjeev Aggarwal, Executive Chairman, Hexa Climate, Mr. Saurabh Kumar, Vice President India, the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. We request them to be on the dais, please. And Mr. Anil Rawal, MD and CEO, Intellismart Infrastructure Private Limited. And we have Mr. Devndra Chawla, MD and CEO, GreenCell Mobility. Let's have a huge round of applause for them. Thank you. To begin with, I invite Dr. Shailly Kedia, Curator and Senior Fellow, the Energy and Resources Institute, to deliver the welcome address. Shailly. Yeah.
Thank you, Palak. Very good morning to all of you. And as the curator of the World Sustainable Development Summit, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you at this important thematic track by Tata Capital on climate finance, accelerating India's decarbonization journey at the World Sustainable Development Summit 2025. The discussion comes at a critical time as India stands at the crossroads of economic growth and climate responsibility. The need for energy transitions and a low carbon economy has never been more urgent, and the role of climate finance as a vital means of implementation is key. India has made remarkable progress in expanding its renewable energy capacity, also in areas of energy efficiency, and some of the stalwarts are right here sitting on this panel. Of course, these milestones are significant, yet achieving 2030 and 2070 targets require even a larger scale of investment and financial innovations. The financing needs for India's energy transitions is enormous. It is estimated that the country requires about 2.5 trillion US dollars by 2030 and more than $10 trillion to achieve net zero by 2070. And some of the studies actually even predict higher numbers. India has successfully leveraged sector-specific financial institutions and global markets, but still several barriers remain, which includes regulatory barriers, risk-related barriers, and the misaligned expectations of investors. Overcoming these challenges will require not just policy reforms and innovative financial instrument, but strengthened partnership and a dialogue between public and private sector. And I think this thematic track is a very important messaging towards that direction. Today's discussion will explore how we can unlock large-scale climate finance, de-risk investments, and build an enabling environment for green capital flow. We will hear from the leaders in finance, clean energy, and sustainability who will share their insights on the role of institutional investors, policy frameworks, and emerging financing mechanisms such as green bonds, blended finance models, and public-private partnerships. This thematic track is not just about identifying challenges, it's about action-oriented solutions. I'm sure that all of you in this room cannot wait to hear from our experts and to engaging discussions. Together, let us drive dialogue, deliver decisions, and deepen decarbonization. Thank you, and welcome once again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kedia, for setting the stage for the upcoming discussion. And as we all know, that climate finance plays a crucial role in driving India's decarbonization efforts. And today we have a distinguished lineup of experts who will shed light on the opportunities and challenges in this space. And now moving on to our core discussion, it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed moderator for today, Mr. Sindwani, who is the Chief Business Officer, Cleantech Finance, Tata Capital, and Managing Partner of the Tata Capital Decarbonization Fund. With that, I hand it over to our moderator, Mr. Sindwani, to take the discussion forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Shailly. Thank you, Palak. Good morning to all of you. It's my absolute pleasure to be here with all of you, and it is my absolute pleasure as well to be amongst this esteemed panel, such distinguished panel. I'll just take a minute or so and set the background. If you look at it, India's decarbonization journey is not merely energy transition. It is basically a fundamental economic transformation. If you look at the scale of investments that we need, by 2070 we are talking about $10.1 trillion. So finance is not just going to be an enabler, it is going to be the very backbone of this economic shift. Now what we have seen is significant momentum, but what is needed in next 10, 20, 30 years is the acceleration. How do we do that, right? We have today on the panel thought leaders, business leaders who are shaping this energy transition on ground. How do we move from regulatory intent to financial innovation? How do we move from risk perception to opportunity realization? So we'll try and address all of these questions. So our attempt will be to cut through the noise and see what's been working, what's not, and what's next. With that, I welcome all of you and all the panelists on the dais. But before I do that, allow me to briefly introduce each one of them. So to my immediate left is Mr. Anil Rawal. Anil Rawal is the MD and CEO of Intellismart Infrastructure Private Limited. He's the ex-civil services officer of 1996 batch and has more than 25 years of leadership experience across both corporate and government organizations. He is an IIM Ahmedabad alumnus. Immediately after him, we have Sanjeev Aggarwal, who I have had the pleasure of knowing for more than now 15 years. So Sanjeev joined Hexa Climate as executive chairman in August 23. Prior to joining Hexa, he was founder, MD and CEO of Amplus Solar, which is now acquired by Petronas. In his career span of more than 28 years, he has also worked at AES and GreenCell across a number of senior management roles. Sanjeev is again an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, and he also received the FICCI Young Leaders Award in 2013. Thank you, Sanjeev, to you as well. To his left is Saurabh Kumar, again someone who I have pleasures of knowing for a very long time. He's an Indian Revenue Services Officer of 92 batch. He joined Indian Revenue Services as Assistant Commissioner of Income Tax and has worked as Deputy Commissioner in various sensitive intelligence assignments. After IRS, he joined the Union Ministry of Power, Government of India, as Deputy Secretary in charge of the Budget and Finance Wing with the task of appraising large power projects for government investments. Saurabh has a degree in electrical engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, and has a master's degree in public policy from National Graduate Institute of Policy Studies, Tokyo, Japan. Thank you, Saurabh, for joining us. And last but not the least, we have Mr. Devndra Chawla. He is MD and CEO of GreenCell Mobility. Devndra led the company's vision of being the pioneer in creating a sustainable ecosystem for shared e-mass mobility space and building NewGo, India's leading intercity electricity bus mobility brand. Devndra has a rich and varied experience of over 25 years in consumer business, FMCG, retail, working with startups, entrepreneurs, and Fortune 500 companies in senior leadership roles. Devndra has an AMP from Harvard Business School, PG Diploma in Digital Business from Emeritus MBA from Symbiosis Institute of Business Management, and is a gold medalist in engineering from Pune University. Thank you, Devndra. All right, thank you, and let's begin with the core as Palak defined just a moment back, which is, what do we do to accelerate India's decarbonization journey? And if you allow me, Mr. Rawal, I might start with you. The first question to you would be, beyond the smart meters, as we know so far, the public perception is that it is essentially meant to bring down the the billing or distribution losses, so as to say. But beyond billing accuracy, what do you see uh, smart meters enable in terms of deeper market transformation? Uh, do you also see the role of smart meters in grid stability and various other such allied activities?
Yeah. First of all, thanks a lot, and thanks for having me here. First of all, good to see that program like smart metering attracting the right kind of attention. And probably this is one of the largest transformational intervention governments or distribution companies are doing. And let me tell you, it is perfectly rightly timed. There's a large amount of worry around the program. There's multiple perceptions which obviously get built when you really run a very large program. That's also perfectly okay. If you have more perception, that basically it means we are on right track. So for sure, this is a transformational digital program which is going to touch every citizen of this nation for sure, without any gap, because we are fully electrified country, and it will touch us digitally. It'll make us feel and perceive electricity different than what we are doing so far. Electricity is no more would be treated as a commodities which actually is there and we use it till, and for distribution companies also it's no more a business as usual. It's a way to serve the consumer and it's more of a service. So that's the transformation in terms of nature of the commodity, I would say, and there will be transformation in terms of the users who really use electricity, as it's a given thing. It's not user charges is something which is going to be very critical from here on. If you don't recharge, there is no power. Positive is you recharge only to the extent you need, so you use to the extent you need, you don't splurge it, which has been the culture in the country. Stated numbers, as Pankaj you are referring to, was more than 30% stated quantified numbers of losses. That basically means if I really work for 100 rupees, then I get only 70 and 30 is lost. So more the work, more the loss. Then why do you work? Don't work. So that was the system perception in distribution companies also. Buy less power, sell less power, have less loss. That's where we stand, where we stood a few years back. Things are changing for sure. I want to give you very, very right picture that things are changing for sure, sustainably and for long time to come. Telltale signs are Assam has turned positive. They earned profit of 250 crore rupees last year, first time ever in the history of their existence. Bihar has turned positive. They were 2,500 crore losses 2 years back. They are in profit this year. They are very small early signs. They are the utilities which started smart metering way back. They took the first mover advantage. They passed through the pain first. It's the pain for sure. It's the pain one has to pass through. But these are substantial, solid, relevant changes, and they are going to impact the socio-economic setup of the nation. It's no more only IT change. It's no more a metering change. For God's sake, it's not metering change. You know, people feel it's metering. Meter is just an event. It will happen once in our houses. After that, it's all process of digital capture of data, managing it, doing and using it. So that's a big process which we are undergoing the change. In Bihar and Assam, whichever positive we are talking about is after only 20-25% of the metering. I really think what happens if really 100% metering happens in this country. So coming to your point, yes, for sure, because we were under immense pressure as country to reduce our T&D losses. As I said, 30% was loss, and there was a huge exchequer flow to fill this gap, which was the major point, and privatization has not gone too far in this country. So billing and collection loss, which is the major part of the loss, was to be captured, and that's why this program came up. And so T&D loss reduction was the prime use case of the program for sure. But somehow we missed the larger picture because nation had a big kind of challenge in front of it. So we all came together and heads together and tried solving it, which actually on roll. About 20 crore meters have already been ordered, 14-15 crore meters have been, started the process. About 2 crore meters are installed. So journey is, I think, well begun. There'll be roadblocks, but then that's, as I said, a positive part of the story. Coming to the point that what is beyond T&D loss reduction, I think we started well in a year or two back, and we are at the right pace, right time. Now it's a time to think if we are investing so much in generating this infra, because it's quite a cost, more than 3 lakh crore rupees going into this investment into this business. So what do? Do you keep measuring electricity only, and there's a cop standing outside home and measure how much electricity is gone and how much it has come, and that's all? No. That's, as I said, the first use case, actually the A of A to Z, I would say. We are talking about, let me just briefly touch upon other critical parts of the story. We are talking about renewables. We are for sure heading towards 500 gigawatt by 2030, which actually is going to happen, and what I think is going to happen much more than 500. Why? Because of the macro environment situations where carbon taxation has come big way in the globe. EU, which is already put in carbon tax, and they are going to start on 26, and hard to abate. All businesses which will be exporting to EU would be at a disadvantage. They are really running helter-skelter to get the renewable and offset the carbon. Because they can't offset immediately by investing all the capex in changing their machines and setup, so they are going for the, and to my understanding, if I'm not wrong, all the capacities of renewables up to 2026 are bought out already. They're sold out actually. There's nothing which is available. That basically means it is on self-perpetuating, self-pushing mechanism. Renewable is going to come big time in this country, much more than we're expecting. Along with the fact, interestingly, thermal is also going to come big time in this country. Why? Because thermal would be all thanks to energy security requirements, because you have to feed such high demand in this country, and renewable would be to feed this carbon situation in the country as well as globe. So this is a clear direction, and as I always keep saying, the best time for power sector is just beginning. Why? Because generation obviously is going to do well. There's no reason why they can't do well. Transmission is very well placed in this country. Distribution is performing extremely well now. From with the Assam BR example and there are many examples coming up, now the paymaster is in good health. They'll be allowed to pay for the power procurement. They'll now drive more power. They'll ask for more and more and more power. Not that earlier demand was not there. Always we felt that supply is more than demand for a few years, which was never true. Demand was there, it was not being fulfilled. That's why people like us, many were living in RWAs and surviving on the genset power, paying 21 rupees, 25 rupees per unit, and really searching for power from Discom at 8 rupees, 9 rupees. It was not available. Now it's getting available because your infra is getting strengthened by this health of the financial health of the Discoms, and that's why the supply would be better, the demand would be far more. So this is going to the picture from here, and this renewable and EVs and solar rooftop can only happen when you have the smart metering at ground, which is the building block of smart grid. So that's what I'm seeing. This is multiple use cases which we are going to generate and solve from here with the smart metering. I think to start with, this is enough, and we can talk more. Yeah.
Thank you. Let me now come to you, Sanjeev. Sanjeev, you earlier built Amplus. Now you are building Hexa from grounds up. One big change that I see from the journey that you had maybe 10 or 12 years back, and the journey that you're undertaking now, the nature of energy requirement has essentially changed. Earlier, if you were to set up plain vanilla solar projects, plain vanilla wind projects, then you would still be able to find buyers both at utilities end or at corporates end. But now if you look at the bids, or if you look at the incoming demands from consumers, more and more people are asking for FDRE kind of power or RTC kind of power. So what does it do in terms of the capacity at the developers end and also the capacity at financiers end? Do you really think there is still a lot to be learned there, and it is possible that some entities will end up taking too much risk at this point in time, having not fully understood how it will pan out over a period of time, because we are still dealing with the complex technologies or complex integration at least of various sources. What do you say about that?
Thank you, Pankaj. Thanks for inviting me here. Always a pleasure to meet you. I think what you're talking about, like probably 15 years back or 20 years back, is the evolution of the technologies. Is nothing more than that. So we all go through the evolution phase. So in the earlier phases, probably 20 years back, we were still in the experimentation phase of solar when we started doing in 2007, 8, etc. The mainstay was coal, to some extent gas, hydro, etc. So what we need as consumers in electricity is 24 by 7 supply. That's the ideal condition. Now from where you supply that, that's a secondary part of it. Now which technology you use at which point of time is something which is only defined by what is available. So probably if we look at the early 2000 type of scenario, the coal was the only solution that people were looking at. We are setting up all types of coal-based plants. We are setting up some gas-based plants. Prior to that, it was like the hydropower. If you go like 50 years back, 100 years back, largely hydropower was the thing, and then the little bit coal plants came in. So now we are at that stage where the renewable technologies, particularly solar, has become extremely viable in terms of pricing. So now, what do you want more? Once it becomes price affordable, then what is our next requirement? It's like literally the greed of the human mind, that now this is very, very cheap, but now I want it 24 by 7. Now how do I get something which is cheap 24 by 7? That's the question. So that question is being answered by the storage. Fortunately now that is the time when we are seeing the same cycle happening in the battery side, particularly the lithium ion battery and probably some other technology of batteries. Those things will come and start stabilizing the way we have been using solar power and wind power, because people have got the message that solar and wind are cheaper than the alternate cost of power, which has been the gas or coal, etc. So marginal cost of a gas plant and coal plant is higher than what is the cost for generation from solar and wind. Now the only thing now I need to do is to stabilize it. Now the question is, who will stabilize it? Earlier that job was largely being taken by the grid. Now as the integration of the renewable energy in the grid is increasing, currently we may be around 10% or 12%, something like that at the grid level. But once it crosses 20%, we are going to be in a situation where you will see that there is an excess supply in certain hours. And that is getting reflected today. If you go on the power exchange, you will find the prices which is probably between 12 and 3 in some, at least in some months of the year, is like less than 2 rupees. You see any time after 6 p.m. and right up to 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. price is 10 rupees. So what does it indicate? It indicates that there is a excess supply of that intermittent solar power. So what the distribution companies are saying is, guys, listen, we can't manage so much of fluctuation. Why don't you manage it? Why don't you manage a part of it? That's where all these FDRE and RTC types of tenders comes into play and say that, okay, I want power in this format. Now you figure out your technology, you figure out your storage, and give me power in this particular format. And that's the nature of these FDRE tenders. And obviously, what it means is that if the responsibility is on us to integrate all these technologies, we need to think properly, plan properly.
Correct.
How much technology, at what place, whether I set up wind, solar, pumped storage, or a battery, etc., but I have to meet this load curve. And because we deal with the technologies which are based on nature, solar and wind, so therefore we are exposed to much more possible fluctuations in our revenue streams, and that's where some of the risk gets passed on to the lenders. So now you need to get careful about what does this guy plan, does it really work, and if it doesn't work, then how do I recover? That's the short answer.
No, thank you, Sanjeev. Let me now come to you, Saurabh. So Saurabh, we've often seen, and this has been part of the discussions in many other forums also, that capital or money as such is not an issue, right? It comes through so long as there are right business models, there are right kind of payment security or risk frameworks available. So where do you see the lack of such business models or lack of such security mechanisms where India can do a lot better? Because India is one country, we cannot depend on subsidies or grants. We will need to have enabling frameworks which could, intermediate a lot of money from global north to global south. So what do you think are those low-hanging fruits where only if we were to work on those enabling frameworks we could attract so much more money?
Thank you, Pankaj. Let me first thank Tata Capital and TERI for inviting me here. I'll answer that question, but let me try and frame the challenge as I see it, including the fact that it's not necessarily given that the money will flow in. And the reason why I'm saying this, we have said that we'll reach 500 gigawatts, and Anil is closer to the government, and I believe his statement that we might exceed it, but we are right now at about 200. If you look at last 3 years, the average capacity addition there is in the range of 15 to 70, but yes, let's presume that we add another 300 more in next 5 years. That needs about 150 billion US dollars in the next 5 years. It also needs, according to the Central Electricity Authority, 47 gigawatt of storage. If I take the current cost of storage, and I'm not including pump storage because I don't think in the next 5 years this country will have any addition to the pump storage plants. It will be all battery energy storage. That's about roughly 20 to 30 billion US dollars. Add to the associated transmission and distribution, we're talking about $200 billion in the next 5 years, right? That's about 60 billion in the clean energy sector, just in solar alone. Almost 2 to 3 times the money flows that you are seeing currently. So there is a challenge. Yes, of course. How can, and I'll come to your question. So, as Sanjeev and you also very rightly said, that pure vanilla utility scale solar perhaps is a thing of the past. We have almost 30 gigawatts which are not finding any takers. Auctions have happened, but no PPAs are getting signed. So of course FDRE etc. is what is on the anvil, but I think the primary focus is shifting rightly towards decentralized renewables. And I'll pick out 2 particular programs which have been kind of were in latency from the government. One is PM Kusum, which can potentially solarize 150 gigawatts of agriculture consumption. And you have the PM Surya, which is the rooftop scheme, another 40 to 50 gigawatts. So you're talking about 200 gigawatts DRE. But yes, here the challenge is how do you create the right business models? Because just subsidies don't work. I mean, just for the information of the House, PM Kusum was launched in 2017 with the ambition of 25 gigawatts and a capital subsidy of nearly 4 billion US dollars. Nothing has been spent in the last 7-8 years. So it's just not money which is needed. When you talk about decentralized renewables, you have to create right business models, and as you say, create those risk guarantees. I mean, I'll be more comfortable, Sanjeev will be more comfortable funding Intellismart rather than funding me on a 3 kilowatt rooftop. So how do we create this? And to my mind, the answer is digitization. And unless you digitize and people and digitize the whole transaction, not just the disbursal of subsidy, but also monitor how do you make sure that you our energy is flowing and people are honoring PPA. So yes, what is needed first is a right business model, and I think states like Rajasthan and Maharashtra seem to have found that business model, particularly for agriculture. Just to tell you, Rajasthan has already bid out 3 gigawatts of decentralized solar at an average cost of 3 rupees per unit, and same is the case with Maharashtra. So I think there is the way business model has been found, and they have been using digital platforms extensively for this, and hopefully the other states will also follow. And as you know, the PM Surya, the entire scheme is driven through the National Rooftop Portal, and we have been very fortunate to be part of that whole exercise. So I'll talk about it more in our subsequent round. So
sure. So that was really useful. Thank you, Saurabh. Devendra, we've seen in the last 3 years EV adoption increasing at a very fast clip, and yet if you look at our ambitions and look at the real adoption, there still seems to be a considerable gap. Where do you see are the challenges? Where do you see we need to do so much more? And what are your suggestions to mitigate some of those challenges if we were to adopt faster?
Well, thanks, Pankaj. And First of all, thanks to Tata Capital and TERI for inviting me. Just so that before I answer, people know about GreenCell mobility. We run electric buses. We are one of the largest operators with 1,300 buses. We run buses for the state as the GCC contract in Uttar Pradesh. In fact, all of the buses which ran in Kumbh, 200 buses, were EV buses which we ran as GreenCell mobility for all the days in Kumbh. We also run in Gujarat and in Maharashtra. Now, Pankaj, EV actually is the latest kid on the block when it comes to sustainability. And in the last, post-COVID, if you see, there used to be this term around COVID, this range anxiety. To some extent, that's gone. And if you see the sales of two-wheelers and even new three-wheeler sales, you'll be surprised the new three-wheeler sales are more than 50% is in the EV sector. And so much shift in the last 2-3 years have also happened in the cars. Buses has a long way to go. The penetration of buses, and you'd love to know that the bus market in India is $50 billion US. This is as per a McKinsey study, and by 2030 it will be a $100 billion market, right? And the penetration is only 1 or 2% when it comes to buses, and buses is the largest polluter of any moving vehicle in India, more than cars or even two-wheelers. Now there's been great support through FAME subsidies, and even as Saurabh was saying, some of the projects which are coming through CESL are even without FAME subsidy, and they work, and some are with FAME. And as the objective is to kickstart an industry and let it be on its own, any industry which needs very large capital and large capex upfront will need some subsidies. So the challenges, or I mean the growth of the industry will really, the catalyst would be localization, one of the largest one. For example, if I take a car and a bus, not so much as a two-wheeler, the battery as a cost of the vehicle is 40%, right? A bus can cost from 1 crore to 1.8 crore, and imagine 40% of it is the battery cost, which is as much or more than even one of the high-end cars. The production of that in India through PLI linked scheme, or battery cell manufacturing in India, or having long-term contracts with countries like Australia, Chile, Indonesia, right, for semiconductors, and as much localization for making motors in India, I think that will bring the cost down. And there's a concept called TCO, and in simple terms, total cost of operation, which is versus running an ICE or a diesel bus, you substitute. And to give you a simple example, a bus on a 1 liter of diesel would run 3 to 4 kilometers. So roughly, let's say 25 to 30 rupees per kilometer. And a unit of power for EV will be like roughly 8 rupees, right? So that's where the advantage comes while the capex is high. As the bus prices comes down thanks to localization, I think the adoption will become massive. Because today there is still a gap between an EV and a diesel or a petrol vehicle, whether you take a two-wheeler, three-wheeler. And while there are subsidies or incentives, I think, while I don't know the exact year, I think in the next 2 to 4 years, somewhere they will match, where I think the adoption will become massive.
Thank you. Thank you. So let me come back to you, Anil. And so you earlier spoke about the business case for smart meters, and it is very clear it has a very strong business case. And from your examples of Assam and Bihar, these states have benefited a great deal after they adopted the smart meters program. On ground, though, we see the implementation seems to be far slow vis-a-vis whatever targets we had set ourselves. What do you think are the key challenges? And what do we need to do to make sure the adoption is now much faster? And if you could also briefly talk about what is that distinguishing factor which separates you, say, from someone else? Someone else has better speed of implementation versus the others. So if you could just throw some light on that.
Yeah, so first of all, I have observation on very slow speed. So we obviously should be, and our impatient nation should be, means all the countries, nations who are growing fast have to be impatient, and that's what we should be, which is perfectly fine, and it is a very positive approach. But for the sake of comparison, if I can raise, UK, which is supposed to be the leader in smart metering, took 5 years only in planning the program, did nothing, just planned the program, and then 5 years in implementation of first phase. And needless to say, what is the population of UK and what is the population of India? We are very sure and comfortable on that. And somehow we planned to complete it in 2 years, 2.5 years, or about 3 years, 250 million. We have already crossed 20 million, which is no less a number in last whatever period we are with. I think credit goes to Saurabh, who is sitting with us, who initiated this program in the country without a RDSS being in place. From there, actually, RDSS came up, and the way it's running now is that played the precursor for this program. So we have really done well. I don't think that we are anyway doing poor. Why? I'll just add to that. One, because this program has a critical milestone when you are trying to do this, and this comes from my earlier point of smart metering. People feel it's metering. It's not metering. Metering, as I'll again say, meter is an event. Smart is a process. You have to take care of the process. Meter installations could be very fast. You can install lakhs and lakhs of meters per day, because it's a mechanical digital asset which will actually do what it does. When it comes to smart meter, it is just like having the facility as your mobile has. It has a lot many features, firmware, software. Then there will be significantly strong IT backend, which actually the nerve center of this whole process. How it will run for 10 years, and how it gets switched off when you are your money is gone, how it gets reconnected, what kind of tempers it sends. In smart meter, it's supposedly, if you open the box of the meter, it has to send a signal. Even if you touch it, if you put a magnet on this, there are 45 tempers which smart meter has to tell. It has to send data every 15 minutes. It has to send multiple more noises which actually are captured by the system. So configuring the system for this kind of appliance across the nation, and along with the fact that every state discom has around 50 kind of tariffs in this country. We have complexed ourselves too hard in last 75 years. For every kind of consumer, we have a different kind of tariff. So every discom have differential tariff. So that all tariff profiles are to logically built it in the system. When you are building it and configuring the billing system to the meter data management system, which captures the data from meter, it's quite a process. So this whole thing has to be tested thoroughly, because any error which get built in the design of the program would take us years to correct. That milestone is called system acceptance testing. That is a milestone which is to be achieved by the AMISP, the contractor who is installing, and the company together. They have to agree on the basic design architecture and the profiling of this whole system, so that it is in shape. And the document says, bidding document says that you have to do it at 25,000 meters only. Even if it's a 1 crore kind of consumers kind of project, you have to do it so that distribution company is sure, and you are also sure, that your program is running well. That is taking a bit more time than we expected. And unless that is done, the bigger ramp up should preferably not happen. It is advisable that why should you do lakhs and lakhs of meters while you are not completed the system acceptance testing. In most of the states, wherever things are slow, is largely on account of this. That's one reason, and I'm very sure that it is rather more firming up and giving a solid framework while you want to go to a ramp up. Ramp up is not very difficult when you have this milestone done. In our case, we have done 4 out of 6 projects. We have completed this SAT, and we are ramping up. 2 projects are still to do. So that's taken more time, but that's actually contractually not good, but then for the system it's good actually. That's first part. Second is the consumer. Consumer would obviously, if I say that 30% of the consumers were not paying, fathers and forefathers have not paid and have been fine with the kind of electricity we were getting, 4 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours. When I myself had 4 hours of power in my young times. And that too, it used to blink, sometime coming, sometime going. It will not tell when it will go. power coming was a big celebration. Power going was perfectly okay, right? So, but things are changing. You know, the time we are living is far better than that, and so there has been resistance from that strata of the society, and that resistance is very natural. We take into our stride, and this actually brings me to your other point, that how we differentiate as Intellismart. So we have done the largest number of meters along with the ESL, our parent company in this country, and we differentiate by customer segmentation and doing the right kind of consumer awareness and public connect. To the extent it is referred to Kumbh, so I recall we have just done a large all 45 days kind of clipping in Kumbh Mela. So our clipping was playing all the time in Kumbh Mela. It's just to connect with the people, and what we do is a consumer segmentation, reach out to them and do the consumer awareness, the kind of need they need. You can't have one stick for all. That's our core strength. We have done that in Assam. We have done ahead of time. Let me assure you, program is perfectly doable. First project was done 15 days, not too many, but 15 days ahead of time. It was not late. It was written in the completion certificate of a distribution company. So it's perfectly doable. Scale is big. We are trying to really do very aspirational job. I'm sure we'll be able to do, and we are not off track. That I want to assure you.
Thank you. That is reassuring. Sanjeev, large part of your stint has been in addressing the energy transition needs of your corporate clients in the commercial and industrial clusters. Do you think there is one big section of that commercial and industrial segment missing here, which is SME, MSME? They are also as eager to transition to green, but somehow even as a lender, we've not come across many projects, and I would imagine lenders also need to take equal blame for not being able to address that part of the segment. But what do you think needs to be done to address that part of large segment, which is also waiting to be green, and India's decarbonization journey will be incomplete unless we address the SME, MSMEs part?
Yes, I think you're right. So normally the poor suffers the most. So these are the poor countryside cousin of the larger industrial guys who will buy much cheaper power, much cleaner power, and these guys nobody want to service, for the simple reason, if we think that they may not be able to pay. That's one logic. The second logic is we think that their business may not be very stable, so why should we do business with them? I think that's the situation we are in. Having said that, I think all of them are realizing the cost saving potential. They are probably not looking at so much from the green lens, but looking at more from the cost saving potential, because everybody reads the newspaper and says like the solar power is 2.5 rupees, 3 rupees. So why are we not getting it? So people want to do it, but the challenge is that nobody wants to do the OPEX model for them. What they have to end up doing is, if they wanted to set up a rooftop plant, they have to buy the plant, and then somebody has to fund it. And because they are small, so they have limited capital availability. They have their own working capital requirements. So always the challenge is whether you want to invest the capital available in your main business, which potentially can generate 20, 25%, 30% returns, or you want to invest in the solar asset, which will be like 12, 15% type of the returns. So I think if there is a more acceptance in the minds of the investors and lenders, then potentially these people can now get power under open access, because open access allows 100 kilowatt plus. So if the distribution companies little bit facilitate the metering arrangements and make it simpler to get the approvals, then all these people can actually start getting power. And then we have to, from the investor and lenders perspective, we have to little bit come off that mindset we want only A plus. So because if I come to you and say, at what price you will lend to me, okay, what is the quality of the customers? What is the rating of the customer? Rating of the customer is A or less, or are we sure we really want to do this business? So that's the question. Because in my mind, I think open access will take away a lot of the risks away. If some of these customers don't pay, or their business ends up failing, you can always find out more customers. So that is probably the right segment for these people to get that access to the green power. Rooftop was not the right model for them. OPEX, people didn't want to fund CAPEX, they didn't have the money. So I think now potentially there is a chance that all this power can flow to MSMEs.
Thank you. In fact, we've seen some examples, Sanjeev, where an investor has set up, for instance, a large plant in Tamil Nadu,
Correct.
where the individuals are probably seeking 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt, those kind of, so maybe 300 off-takers against a single plant, and all through open access projects. So they are ready to pay a little higher also. As you said, poor suffers the most. Yeah.
So essentially, if you go to a large customer like Amazon, he will say, I will pay you say 3 rupees. You go to a smaller guy, he will say, I am willing to pay 4 rupees. Because
Right.
still he's saving money. But for the hassle that you're taking of serving a smaller customer, then obviously you charge a higher price. And there are companies like your LinkedIn, etc., who are doing it like in a big way in states like Tamil Nadu. But it requires a different mindset and different thinking process.
Absolutely. So Saurabh, you earlier talked about the power of decentralized solar, decentralized energy, and I so agree with you, because this is one big way to cut down our transmission losses. Of course, we also will need to think through the integration, etc. But what do we need to get to a situation where we can really scale it up? So far, that scale has been lacking.
Yeah, you mentioned this in your question itself, the issue of integration. And let me tell you the challenge. I mean, since we have developed the MNRE's website, we know nearly 800,000 people in this country in the first year have already installed solar rooftop.
Wow.
Now imagine in this city, if there are 100,000 rooftops, does anybody know the nearest transformer? Does it have the requisite capacity? The challenges of this is very simple. If I have a 10 kilowatt rooftop on my house, if my transformer cannot take it, I will not be able to sell anything. So whatever I consume, that's it. So I think where we are now working towards is actually a digital transformation. And I'll just give an example. Why did UPI succeed so much in this country? Because there was an underlying digital public infrastructure, as it is called. What Anil is doing is digitizing the periphery, which is the consumer. But no one has talked about what do you do with the entire network itself. And that is what we have just started off in state of Rajasthan, where we are creating a digital twin of the distribution network. Now, what do you mean by digital twin? Those of us who have been in the electrical engineering will remember something called a single line diagram. So in very simple terms, this is a single line diagram, but digital. Another very simile I can give you is it's a Google map of the distribution network. So that is what is needed in this country. Once you have this digital public infrastructure and you have the outer layer through the smart meters, you can then do multiple things. And just like your UPI moment, this could be what Nandan Nilekani says is the UEI will come up, Unified Energy Interface, which can lead to multiple different transactions, also address the issue that you raised in the previous question, business model. And hopefully in the next 3-4 months, we should have one digital twin ready. What it is able to do is to tell me exactly where I need a battery, because in that place there are too many distributed energy resources. It could be an EV charger, it could be a rooftop, it could be anything else. And I will visualize the whole network right in front of me. And then we are also building up an AI layer, like a chat GPT. This is for the senior leadership, which will have diagnostics. So what we feel, once we have these things in place, and hopefully in the year 2026, we plan to roll this out in about 10 utilities in the country. And that is how integration of renewables, where do you want to put storage, becomes a kind of a data-driven decision rather than something that people feel, oh, this battery should be here rather than anywhere else. And most importantly, it will drive decentralized energy in a manner that we have not seen in this country till now. Because all the current problems of DISCOMs will get possibly, not all, but at least the technical challenges of integration, will start getting to find solutions, particularly with an AI layer sitting on top of it. So that's what we hope to do in the very near future in the electricity sector.
Thank you. That's really very encouraging. In fact, I also look forward to looking up this portal. Devndra, coming to you, you earlier talked about the penetration of e-buses in the vicinity of 1 or 2%. So that means there is so much more to do in that space. What do you think we need to do to make sure we grow at a much faster clip there? Also, because there is a strong business case, as you said, the overall TCO still works way better. So what are those things which today pose as a challenge, and what do we need to do as industry to make sure those challenges are mitigated?
Yeah, thanks, Pankaj. So I spoke of the bus and the localization substitution and how the cost can make adoption better. On this one, two more things will be very helpful. One is financing. These are long-term infrastructure projects. When we see especially buses, and unlike two-wheelers, which you can also charge at home, you need to create an ecosystem. This is like a railway system. You can't run the train without the tracks. So if I run to, we are the only ones in the world who run, as we speak, 300, and I'm sure some people in Delhi would have seen a Nugo branded bus, electric vehicle bus. We run from Delhi ISBT to many cities, Agra and Chandigarh and Amritsar. We have the world's first sleeper bus and an EV bus which we ran, intercity. Even today in the world, there's no larger fleet than GCMs, right? People do within the city. What is the GCC contract, like within Delhi? But intercity private buses, it's a new phenomena. Now, you need to create an ecosystem, which means the whole charging infra. You need depots. Where will you keep the bus? You have 100 buses. You can't just park them on the road. Now, this industry was more like a mom and pop industry, like Kiranas, and then it got organized, right? So in India, there are 5 to 6 lakh private buses with 2,500 private operators. So average fleet size is 20 to 25. You can only name 5 companies which have bus size more than 100 buses. For the world's second biggest bus industry in the world after China. China is 28 lakh buses, 2.8 million. India is roughly 1.8 to 2 million buses, 20 lakhs, right? So this creation of infrastructure will need right financing, right? In buses, as I said, out of 1-2% is of even 2 million is 15,000-20,000 buses are there on the road today in all. We have a long way to go. So to create this infrastructure, I think we'll need ESG fund like yours to come in, green bonds. I think MFIs they need to have blended finance, I think on the financing side, which is some grant and some credit. Also, this industry can be given the tag of priority sector, which will reduce the cost of capital, and then a lot more banks can lend to it. For example, GreenCell mobility, we are working with so many private and public sector banks, and our debt equity is in the range of 85 to 15, and our ROI, or cost of capital, of around 8.25 to 8.5%. We can also classify this as an infrastructure sector, whereby funding can come through InvITs. So I think cost of capital allowing for investment, because this is heavy capex. Not just the buses 2-3 times the price of a normal diesel bus. You need an additional ecosystem of chargers and depots, which is not required otherwise. So the infrastructure cost is very high, right? So lastly, as I mentioned, battery is 40% of the vehicle, and if one can separate that, whether swapping or making battery as a service, or leasing as a service, or lease to own, or models like you lease and after a couple of years you can own the asset, allowing the operator to invest initial capital in the infrastructure, not in the bus. I think this is what we need. So I'd say ecosystem and financing.
Thank you indeed. So Anil, let me come back to you. Often when we've spoken to players in the smart meter space, they've talked about this huge potential of data monetization, because there is so much data which is being collected through, like what you said, 20 crore smart meters. And then people also in the same breath talk about the issues surrounding data privacy, right? How do you balance this? On one hand, you have this huge opportunity. On the other hand, you have these concerns. Do you see this happening, in near future? You think it's a long shot?
Yeah, so I think it's already happening. The first tender has already happened in Madhya Pradesh. We participated, didn't succeed. That's rather a good thing because that basically means there are good players in the sector. So it's already happening. It's why? Because of abundance of data, which is very much now available. Every 15 minutes, one data coming from meter minimum. It can be more also. That means about 100 data units per day from every meter. So that's humongous data, and this every data is important. It actually is telling what consumer is doing every 15 minutes. If we have the appliance signature linked to it, then we know that which appliance is consuming how much. So that actually tells the consumption pattern. This also tells if appliances are over consuming, then it's good for the consumer to change the appliance. So that's also very much possible. So then all appliances nowadays are IoT appliances. There's a massive opportunity for the appliance makers to be now knowing this, and they can be doing the targeted marketing, and consumer also would know which is the time for changing what. So that's one part of the story. And for the distribution company, it's rather more a bigger asset because of the peaks. Sanjeev talked about the peaks. These peaks can be managed through time of day, time of use. It can save huge amount of battery investments. Why we are looking at the battery investment, because you have to have lots of energy which is captured and then stored and can be released when you having the demand. That's all. So if you can manage this flow of consumption at the consumer level, then these peaks won't come. It will not need battery investment. It will actually reduce the transmission investment also, because you make transmission of the peaks. So this will reduce that investment also. This will reduce the capex in distribution sector. So that's a huge use case which is very much available. See, recently in February month itself, there were 3 times when the power frequency in our country is 49.9 to 50.01. I think, if I'm not wrong, it went to 49.5 3 times. That is significant instability due to massive renewable being there. It went to 15.15 also. Again, significant instability. This all can be managed if you have the time of day, time of use, and you can actually motivate consumers to use when the power is less and power is high, and use less when it's low, and it can divert the power to the industry. And there's one more tender which is currently on. I'll encourage people to look at that. This is a P2P tender, blockchain tender. Great things are happening in this country. Grid controller has come with a tender. It actually says that can there be transaction between the consumers and the industry? Discom only giving the freewheeling line, that's all, and it can be paid for that. So in that case, the peaks which are being coming in industry also can also be managed through this. So there are multiple things which are happening, and data that way is a huge asset. And you are perfectly right in saying that data privacy issues, there's some amount of leap of faith required. We need to rely on our kind of framework which is around the data privacy, and actually take on this leap and use this data. There's a significant use case available on this.
Thank you, Anil. Sanjeev, one of your stated goals at Hexa is to help your customers decarbonize, right? Your off-takers, your customers decarbonize. And green electrons or green energy can only do as much, or green electricity can do only as much. So what else do you need to do? So for instance, one of your customer wants to be net zero by such and such time. What else are you planning to do for your customer that he's able to achieve his goal of net zero beyond green electron? Yeah.
Obviously, the energy can be also saved, and I think I'm very fascinated by this whole concept of the smart meters and the digitization of the whole thing, because energy efficiency is one of the ways, and something which you can measure, actually you can take action on that. That's the first principle. So with what is happening is, if you are able to measure how you are consuming your energy and you're able to visualize it as a consumer, then you can take the right kind of action at any point of time. So if it's a smart meter which tells me right now the price of the power is 10 rupees, and if I switch off some of the things, I can potentially save. So there can be incentive also to reduce that consumption at that point of time. Similarly, if there is a integration of all the batteries and the solar rooftop, etc., etc. So if there is a EV charging or there is a electric vehicle at my home and I can discharge that and push that power back into the grid by connecting it to the grid. So those are the types of things which will be pretty much possible by the integration of the what Saurabh calls about the digitization of the whole thing, and by putting the hardware into the place. So all these things are going to be very, very exciting. So this is one part of the energy efficiency. The other is obviously we keep on talking about the carbon offsets and the carbon credits type of the mechanism, but that's something which has been coming and going in different formats for last 15-20 years since we have all heard about the Kyoto Protocol. But obviously it's a certain set of countries want it, certain set of countries don't want it. So it's a little bit of a flux. So Europe may be all looking to saying that I want to go all green. On the other hand, we have America who will say like I don't care, I want to drill more. So it's a very difficult situation from the geopolitical consideration. But I think the long term we all know where the direction is. So it may be like the on and off type of the messages from different leaders depending on who is sitting where at what point of time. But long term we know that we need to, if we want to really talk about the net zero, then it can't be done only by renewable. Something else is required, which will all come from the carbon offset. The last tail of 10-20% will be mainly through the carbon offset. What that means is the carbon sequestration, carbon offset projects, and there will be more forestation which is required. So I think if there is at least a realization, and many of the advanced companies and countries are realizing it, that we really need to keep on doing something about it. If you talk to the software companies, you talk to the services companies, banking companies, all of them say you want to become really net zero. If you want to become net zero, you will reach there with the renewables maybe 70-75%. Last 20-25% need to do something else, and that's where some of these projects will be required.
Absolutely. Saurabh, you earlier questioned, and rightfully so, the hypothesis that money is available, specifically given India's vast needs. Now, given the geopolitical situations, right, and given that there is now increased clamor about people denying climate change or less and less money being available, what do you think we need to do to mobilize more capital, both from global sources and also domestically? You've been an integral part of policy making also, and equally you've been a practitioner. What are your views?
So I'll take this into three parts.
Yeah.
What needs to be done? The first is Indian banks and financial institutions. Now I should not be saying this, but I went through the SBI's annual report recently, and it was I was actually unpleasantly surprised that less than 1% of their lending is on Cleantech. Now and their goal is only to reach 5% by 2030. That I feel is just too low from the premier bank of a country, particularly when we all know, I mean, the renewable energy that we see in the last decade is largely funded by money coming from outside India. Now as with the geopolitical situation changing, so I think what is needed is the banks, particularly the public sector banks, need to step up much more than what they have done till now in this clean tech space. Number two, we have been hearing about the MDB reforms now for nearly 2 years. I mean, right from G20 presidency of India, and therefore there needs to be a shift in the MDB's approach. Instead of a pure vanilla line of credit, you need to engage private sector into it by putting your own money. We heard about blended capital both from Sanjeev and Devndra, but who can provide that? It's largely your MDB. So that's the second thing that needs to happen very, very clearly. And the third, because of a significant push on decentralized renewables, I think the microcredit entities need to now also add solar to the list of activities that they have been doing. So Clearly, these three things need to happen and need to happen very, very quickly if we need to raise so much of resources.
Absolutely. So, Devendra, we again coming to e-buses and you talking about the Indian market being almost 2 million buses and less than 5 players having more than 100 buses, right? So that's about the sheer unorganized nature of this market. What do you think needs to be done, or do you think a consolidation is in works here? Do you think Indian market, the way we see it today, specifically for buses, and the Indian market that we'll see, say, 5 years hence, will be very different, and you'll see a lot of more organized players coming in with larger fleets? Do you see that happening?
So I think it needs two things: technology and capital. Technology has already happened. Like the bus is actually, while it's a moving piece of metal, it's actually a piece of technology with hundreds of sensors, real-time data, real-time cameras, including artificial intelligence. In our buses in Yugo, even if the coach captain driver yawns, it'll be captured in real time and the bus will stop, right? So the technology is there. Now all this comes at a cost, right? Like the mom and pop industry where you're running a kirana store and you own the store from 50, 100 years. And these ICE buses also go on for longer, are cheaper, right? If you want to replace and have more sustainable energy, you need the right investment climate and right investment itself. As I said, to put up buses, you need the whole infra, the charging infra, depots, the cost of technology, the whole ecosystem of lithium ion being either mined rare earth metals like cobalt, nickel, or having tie-ups with countries. That needs to happen. And technology is also helping, like platforms, like when Amazon came, right? Or like when Swiggy and Zomato, came and organized, and these are asset light, right? With financing options, if you can focus on the customer, right? Out of the 18 lakh buses, we can leave like 6-7 lakh buses are still school buses, but 1 million are actually moving people every day. 72% of Indians move on bus every single day. I think so to enable this infrastructure through the right capital, even Saurabh mentioned, there are a lot of global funds. Even our first green loan in India was given by Stanchart Bank, which is another an MNC bank. I think locally we need to step up on capital. And the technology is absolutely is moving at much faster pace. Let's not forget, like while on one side there is a clamor of drill, baby drill, there's also Tesla's dying to come to India. It's an EV, right? So and it just speaks of the size of the market and the attractiveness of the market that even Tesla is wanting to come in India.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I guess now we have just about 10 minutes for any questions from the audience. So I'll open it up to audience. If you have any questions for any of our panelists, yeah. Can you please state your name and then your question, please? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Ravi from Harvard, India. We are focusing on decarbonization as a subjective. Thanks for the wonderful discussion. Glad to hear what we spoke about smart metering and what we spoke about EV buses. And I think Mr. Aggarwal also mentioned about the efficiency, energy efficiency. So my question is very simple. When do Indian corporates come to the climate party? When do they start looking at their investments for the green transition which we seek? 70% of infra is yet to be built in India. If you look at 2050, we're looking at about $200 to $150 billion minimum investment. In a way, what we're looking at is about 4-6% of GDP globally on the green transition. So that is first. Second is, how do we look at the 4P approach, that the philanthropic capital, the private capital, and the public capital comes together for the clean transition? I think that's what he was trying to drive the point at. So blended finance is a key major factor for the multiplier we seek. And if you look at clean technologies, when do corporates come and pilot clean technologies?
Right.
Because he said that clean technologies are available, which I second, because we are working with a lot of startup founders and innovators. But the challenge is that they do not get a bridge with the corporates.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Who would like to take that? Sanjeev, corporates, when are they coming to climate party? I mean, I think all of you are well qualified to, take up this.
At least my simple view is corporates exist for a reason. And normally the reason, as we all know, is for profits. So profit is their primary concern. The climate party is at least in, I can be very blunt here, is an offshoot of that. So if it makes commercial sense, I will do green thing. If it doesn't make commercial sense, I will go and do the black thing. So that's what you're hearing from US also. On one hand, you talk about like, okay, drill baby drill. On the other hand, is a Tesla. Both are money making businesses. Both want to do business and both not to make money. So if corporates want to really do this business, you have to see the technologies which are maturing. So if you want to invest in the more development stage or more in the R&D stage, that money typically comes from 2-3 sources. One is from the governments. Governments fund a lot of the R&D things across the countries. You see China, you see US, etc. So the money has to come from the government side. If Indian government doesn't want to fund that thing, so obviously we will be lacking behind in the R&D. That is the first part of it. Second part is the larger corporates have certain pool of the capital which say I am willing to do as a more like a VC, and I am willing to say put my 2% of my budget into the R&D, hoping that something will come out of it. So there is the second part of it. Third is to get little bit of the VC money, which is like purely speculative. For that to come into India, you need a full ecosystem. So why VC money goes into like a Silicon Valley to fund the internet startup is because there are like the high quality people. It's like really the density of excellence, what you find in Silicon Valley, that you find very, very high quality startup, very high quality founders, very high quality coders who are all sitting there. So all the investors go there and start funding it. If we are able to create that type of ecosystem, then obviously that money can also potentially come here. So I think don't get frustrated. That's the reality of life.
Okay, let me just add to your question as to when do we see corporates coming up, and my answer is 2026. And why I'm saying this is the India's domestic carbon market should be up and running in 2026, which will provide an impetus for, not just impetus, a mandate. Number two, PPP partnership, particularly the first piece started with philanthropy, I think is happening in this country for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And at least I can tell you 2 instances where this partnership has worked very, very well. One is where we as a philanthropy have funded India's first and the largest grid-scale battery project, which will be commissioned in the next 3 weeks, and also created knowledge products around it. Now, what has happened thereafter is almost a gigawatt of tenders have already started to come out. So basically, philanthropy's work is to kickstart a market, hold it for some time, and let it scale as it goes.
Yeah, I agree, and I would also say that corporates have already joined the climate party. Many of them already have. You see, much of the energy transformation or energy transition is being led by private sector. Of course, it is a PPP, but we already see a lot of private sector involvement. There is so much more needs to be done, and I agree with Saurabh. With some of these frameworks emerging, we'll see so much more involvement. Thank you so much. Any other question? Yeah, please.
Hi, I am Joseph from CalSTAT, and I was also with Niti Aayog earlier. So a quick question, sir. You mentioned about SBI. I've also seen about LIC chairman saying that he's putting $30 billion, both long-term and short-term investments in G6, which is giving it 7% returns. And his point is, we need to give more returns to our stakeholders, but the lack is we don't see any bankable projects. How do we see in terms of regulatory infrastructure to create a large-scale bankable and investment projects for these stakeholders, including SBI and LIC, where like we have enough domestic capital, which tying up all the industries. Not like if you look at, at the moment SECI does solar, MHI does around e-buses, everything in silos. But the investors need something, one institution where they can put in their investments and get their returns. Maybe for LIC, even a 10% returns will make him very much happy. So given this framework in the regulatory system, how do you see it can happen? One example in US, what happened in previous administration, the 4 departments, the US Department of Energy, Transport, Environment, and Housing and Urban Affairs, all of them have come together and signed an MOU to mobilize billions of dollars investments as a backstopping, addressing several risks in several sectors, including technology risk, including residual risk, or many other risks. How do we look at in Indian
Sure.
sector? Thank you.
Okay, so I think I'll quickly go back to what SECI did in the last decade and how it was able to catalyze, just because it had the power to enforce a payment security mechanism. So I think when you look at investment, whether from domestic or from the way your contract law in the country gets implemented is extremely important. So SECI did that. What the government did beautifully last year is to create a SECI for transport.
Right.
Right. They set up CESL, which is a subsidiary of EESL, as the SECI of it's a copy paste there. But yes, when you go to things like what I was mentioning, PM Kusum or PM Surikar, it's not easy to then aggregate in a manner that you can attract LICs of the world or SBIs of the world. So I think two states, which I mentioned, Maharashtra and Rajasthan, and we are supporting them. We are actually working with the state discoms to aggregate projects and then help them secure private investment. And one of the projects, Sanjeev, which I wanted to highlight is a 400 megawatt aggregation for SMEs in Maharashtra, which has actually thrown up tariffs which are the lowest in the country, and people are willing to do this on an energy as a service basis rather than an ownership model. So I think this continues to evolve, but what I still feel is much more ambition from the Indian FIs and banks than what we have seen at least in the last decade.
Yeah, please go ahead.
And I can add to what Saurabh said. What transformed the power on the power side is actually just happened a couple of months back on the transport side. And Joseph, you know it more than anyone else. Joseph used to be part of Niti Aayog. We've met him a couple of times, and thanks for your contributions. I think that is what makes a project bankable, right? That if you know that you're going to pay it on time, you can do your mathematics on ROI and IRRs is when capital comes in. Whether it's domestic or foreign, really doesn't matter. I think with that coming in, all the CESL, part of ESL, now becomes much more attractive. And the recent bidding, which happened 3 months back, of 4,400 buses, where we won 1,700, actually saw the highest amount of participation in the history of the country, of the number of people bidding, including even the Adanis. Yeah. So I think that's what matters.
And if I may add, it's a myth that investing in green is any less lucrative. There are enough and more examples. When I will tell you of many examples where people investing in green have made 18% plus returns, right? And 20% plus returns. Private equity players who are all present in India, their expected IRRs are all in excess of 20%, and all of them are investing in green. So it's a myth to state that these projects do not. You just need to choose the right kind of projects. There is enough money to be made even in green. Thank you. With that, please join me in giving a big round of applause to all our panelists. I think we've been fortunate to have such a distinguished set of panelists. So thank you so much, Devendra, Saurabh, Sanjeev, and Anil. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As we wrap up, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished speakers and panelists for the time and insights, of course. A special thanks to Tata Capital for organizing this crucial discussion on climate finance. Thank you for all of you for being such a wonderful audience, and we hope that today's session has provided valuable takeaways for advancing climate finance in India's decarbonization journey. So I request everyone to have lunch, and some of you can go to hub area because this has to be vacated at 1:30 for the next session. Thank you so much, and speakers can proceed to Silver Oak. My colleague Anuradha will take you there. Thank you so much. Thank you.